Today on Mother Mayhem.
Some of you are surely caregiving anyway, but I want all of you to get back in the driver's seat of that choice, because caregiving for someone who has abused you can really be re-traumatizing if you're not careful. Think about it for a second. You are going back to take better care of the person who took lousy care of you. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast for Daughters. Hi, I'm your host, Heather Gray. In today's episode, it's going to include another listener question and letter, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you about it in just a bit. We're going to be tackling what happens when moms create drama between all of the siblings in a family, and how do you address the chaos that can somehow ensue, particularly when we're talking about an aging mother who needs help with her health. But first, I think it's kind of important here that I come to you and maybe share a little bit of myself, bring some of my own vulnerability to the table, and ask you for a favor. Because see, here's the thing. When this show started, I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen next. I just knew that I didn't agree with how narcissistic abuse recovery was being talked about on social media. I saw this all or nothing, one way or the highway jargon that was going on. I largely thought it was bullshit, and I just felt compelled to share it. So I pressed record. And those of you who listened to the first episode know that for the first episode, I had to press record like 3 different times over and over again because I didn't quite get it right the first time. And I think that has actually a little bit to do with something I have been chasing my entire life. And that is this feeling inside of trying to meet my potential. Because here's something that this whole conversation I'm about to have with you started with me answering a listener who wrote into the show. And I found myself saying it to her, and I hit send. It felt super vulnerable when I hit send. And there was something about feeling that vulnerability, that thought of, oh, maybe I shouldn't have shared so much. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, that actually went ding, ding, ding. Maybe you should share this with everyone else too. So I'm going to share. And hopefully it helps you get to know me a little bit better, and it allows me to be seen a little bit more too. This professional life of mine, being a therapist, I know I'm good at it. I've always been good at it. I figured that out when I was 19 and I was a camp counselor at this summer camp for abused kids. There was this boy on top of a jungle gym, and I smile every time I think about this. He was refusing to get down from the top of the jungle gym at bedtime. And when I came upon the scene, there were all these camp counselors, and they're like haplessly at the ground, staring up at him, like wondering what the F they were supposed to do. I was the only one who thought to climb to the top of the jungle gym and just talk to him. And at the top of the jungle gym, he told me, he's like, it's really quiet up here. Camp is really loud, and it's making it really hard. I talked to him. I helped him calm down. I got him to bed. And in that moment, I kind of had this instinct or insight where I noticed my potential and my talent in this area. But I gotta tell you, ever since that moment, I feel like it's a feeling that I've been chasing my entire life. Like this feeling of living up to my potential, wanting to live up to my potential. And for a while in my career, when I was working in teenage residential work for this program for girls, I think I really did a good job then of living and working into my potential. The girls were abused. They came from these traumatic backgrounds, similar to a lot of the stories and backgrounds all of you have come from, which is what sparked my passion and interest for this topic. And they would live in this program until they learned to cope with their trauma in ways that were safer for both them and for society. And I did that for a while. And then I went into private practice, and I went from working on a team to working by myself for myself. And honestly, I loved owning my own business. It's great when you can set your own schedule and you can have more financial freedom, but it wasn't that long before, I felt like I was playing it safe and I was playing vanilla and I was being general. And I never got my point of view out there, not like I've been doing on here on the show with all of you. And I look back on it and I recognize that I've been brainwashed a little bit by my college and about the things that I was told good therapists did and what they didn't do. Sharing something like I'm sharing right now is definitely an example of one of those things that a good therapist would never do. We weren't supposed to talk about ourselves. We didn't tell clients what to do, for example. And every week on this show, I'm telling people what to do. But then I was always afraid of the therapy police coming out. And so I found myself back in the day, in my first years as a therapist, really playing it safe. What happened? I got bored. I burned out. I was playing small. And I wasn't really making a difference in the world. I wasn't calling my clients on their shit because I didn't actually know that that was something I could do. I wasn't holding boundaries with myself about how I wanted to be treated. So one night I come home and I tell my husband, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do, but I sure as hell am not going to be a therapist anymore. And I closed my practice. I tried coaching, I tried consulting, I even tried writing these online courses for people as this ghostwriter in the self-help and mental health space. Honestly, I found some success there, but largely still felt like I was in neutral, playing it safe and being really vanilla, trying to help a lot of people. But when you try to help a lot of people, you end up helping no one. And so for 5 years, I tried not being a therapist, but none of my plan Bs ever worked. None of them really felt right. I was always chasing that feeling of not quite living up to my potential, not respecting my talent. And I'm not really sure how to describe this, but at the end of last year, I just heard a whisper. And when the whisper said to me, nothing has felt right since you closed your practice. Maybe you get your license again. Then I questioned, what kind of therapist would I need to be in order to be more engaged with the work? And I decided to be her. And this is where it gets really weird. I asked myself, what would my practice need to look like in order for me to give a shit about it again? And then it just came to me. Mother-daughter relationships. They've been my thing for as long as I can remember. My own mom, she died when I was 6. My relationship with my stepmother was way more about anxiety than any kind of narcissism, but I have lived with a lot of the feelings of being separate, of not being enough, of being difficult to love. And I learned what it was like to be emotionally abused and neglected. And I had years of my own therapy to know that that shit leaves a mark and is carried with us into adulthood. And this is the stuff that fills hours of conversation I have with my friends. It's the books I'm always looking for. It's the thing I give a lot of shits about. So I built this practice solely focused on helping women heal from broken maternal bonds. And just like that, this whisper to start the practice, it wasn't long before I heard the whisper that I could make that kind of impact outside of my office, outside of the office walls. And that's how I started the show, with zero expectations and a lot of piss and vinegar in me about how people were talking about narcissistic abuse recovery. Helping daughters of narcissistic mothers, it is so crazy niche down, so specific, and I am never on social media. So I had no idea how any of you were even going to find this show. And I'm running my own practice and I'm doing my own show. I don't have the time to invest in the marketing of it. All of you who have found this show, you have found it because of search engine optimization, good old-fashioned SEO. I'm looking at my podcast statistics, and the city with the most listeners in it is London. I am recording this show in little old Southern California, and I am being found in London. Someone wrote to me from Hong Kong. The show has charted in Tunisia, Algeria, Denmark. sitting here and talking to all of you, I can tell you that whatever I was searching forever to find, whatever potential I have been chasing, I think I might have found it. And it makes me emotional to talk about, but I am feeling really satisfied. I also just don't think that this is all this show is ever going to be. I think all of us are on the brink of coming together as a community, seeing what we can do and be and create together. And I honestly, I can't wait to figure out and find out what that's going to be. But now that I've started this conversation, now that I'm seeing just that this is a conversation that women are desperate for, I'm feeling pulled to be doing my best to make sure that all of the women who need this show and need to be able to find this show are able to find it. And this is where I really need your help. I'm doing my part. I'm working really hard to learn all that SEO stuff, all of the keywords. You'll see it in the show titles and in the show notes. So hopefully it helps people find it. Heather Clark has been helping me with social media, but we need you. If the conversations that we're having on this show matter to you and they're helpful for you, I really need you to start letting other people know about it. Don't get yourselves all uncomfortable in talking about an issue publicly that you might not be able to acknowledge. You don't have to do that on social media. I'm certainly not on social media doing that, so I'm not asking any of you to do it. But what you can do is you can go to your podcast app, particularly people who are on Apple. 90% of my listeners are finding me through Apple right now. And that is a good podcast app that takes listens and follows and all this thing and then pushes the show out to other people. So if you in particular or an Apple listener, please take some time to follow the show. Reviews are good too. Ratings and reviews always help and let people know that the content is valuable. But any of you on any podcast app, if you're into this show, you might just be listening to it automatically. But if you take the second it takes to follow the show and to leave a rating or review, that pushes it to Apple, especially to start pushing the show out to more people. And it triggers the algorithm to know that this is something good, that we have something good happening here. And we already know that. I know that. But we want other women to know that too. And so the best way that we can help other women find the show and be helped in the same ways that I'm helping you is to get the word out. Again, share it on social only if you're comfortable and feel safe sharing it on social. I am not asking you to out yourselves or out your mothers or out any of your personal business, but anything you can do, follow the show, leave a rating, leave a review. I think that this is the next step. It's part of what we're building. Gosh, I didn't expect to go on like that. I bet you Clark's going to edit it a little bit, but we'll see. All of it's true. All of it's real. All of it is so very true and authentic and genuine. But now let's get on to what we're really here about. And I want to start helping Monica. And yep, I totally took Monica from the show Friends. I like them all. I like all the friends, honestly, but Monica was the first name that popped into mind. So I chose Monica. Here's the thing. I want to add a note about Monica's letter. She's sharing her story as it happened to her and as she's thinking about it. It's her truth, and we believe her. By now, you are all used to hearing the phrase trigger warning on things. I have to be honest with you. I'm not a fan of that phrasing. I never have been. Thankfully, the research is starting to catch up with me in the psychobabble world, and it concurs with kind of what I've been saying too. The phrase trigger warning, it actually increases anxiety. It encourages people to keep avoiding shit that they're not comfortable dealing with. And it keeps people in mad, sad, hard, and scared feelings for longer than they need to be. But I also think it really puts people in this vulnerable state completely, totally unnecessarily. All of you are living with trauma that the most random things can actually be the things that are triggering. There is no way any of us can know what's going to trigger any of you. In theory, this show is a gigantic trigger warning all wrapped up. But here's what I can tell you. Monica is sharing a detailed story of her abusive background, of her trauma, and she wants my help unpacking it. She shares a lot of details, and I am reading this letter in its entirety because I think it models for all of you how to give yourselves permission to take up space. I never want any of you to think you're too much. I never want you paring down your stories. I never want you trying to make yourself smaller. But sharing this letter in its entirety is an intervention in itself for narcissistic abuse recovery. I hope for sure that it's going to help Monica, but I also believe it's going to help a lot of you. Because here's the thing, if someone else wrote it, someone else felt it, and therefore none of you are alone in it. And you deserve to have your stories be heard. You deserve to take up space too. You are not too much. I believe you. We believe you. So if hearing a detailed account of narcissistic abuse and neglect isn't for you today, that's okay. I understand. Monica understands. Today's episode just might not be for you. Deciding not to listen would be an example of you setting personal boundaries for yourselves. You may not be able to listen today. You may only be able to listen to this in bits or in parts, or you may never be able to listen. Do me a favor here. Check in with yourselves. Do that gut check. Whatever your gut tells you, trust it and take care of yourself. Take a deep breath and listen. All right, here we go, Monica. Take comfort in knowing that the people who can and want to listen are listening to you today. I gave them the opportunity to leave, and they have chosen to stay. So they are in it with you, and I am too. We respect your boundary, we respect your vulnerability, and we're going to honor it. So Monica writes, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to reach out to you to let you know that I found your podcast, Mother Mayhem, and it's just what I was looking for. It has helped me understand and better handle my feelings with my covert narcissistic mother. I find your content and how you present it very helpful and informative. I will give you a little background here, and hopefully it won't be a super long email. Apologize in advance if it becomes a bit long. I was raised primarily in the 80s when kids were supposed to be seen and not heard. I always thought my upbringing was good and fairly normal. Monica, if you were listening last week, Stacy said the same thing. I think that this is such a common experience for daughters of narcissistic mothers, is you don't realize how not normal it is until you suddenly really realize. In any case, sorry, I'm diverging from your letter. I'll get back to it. I figured it was normal because I really had nothing else to compare it to. From a young age, I found myself keeping the house clean and making meals for myself because my mom was usually in bed. She would spend all her time either at work when she had a job or volunteering or in bed. I hated messes as a kid, so I would always just clean the house. My mom would always share adult things with me when I was a child that were very inappropriate for me to know. And of course, I didn't know that at the time. I was treated as an adult from a young age on. I was never hugged as a child or kissed goodnight, and I sure wasn't told that I was loved. I remember leaving notes for my mom asking her if she loved me. Kids from school would ask her if she loved me because whenever I would ask to do something with them, she would always say, I don't care. I found it difficult to make friends and to keep them. She always found problems or issues with my friends or their parents, and in turn would make me feel guilty or bad that I wanted to spend time with them. I don't think I had a childhood friendship that lasted for more than a school year or two. My mother was the type to hang out at the school and just help out the male teachers or the pastor. I went to Lutheran schools. I always found that kind of embarrassing, but she would always make me feel bad because she was volunteering her time to help them. And she would always point out that they needed helpers, and she was just doing her part. I was always with my mom. It was like I was her best friend. We did everything together. When high school hit, she had an accident and broke her femur. The surgery that followed was done incorrectly, causing her permanent issues and disability. That's when I became the caretaker. I was a sophomore and I couldn't even drive yet, but I was expected to take care of her and all of her needs. I fed her, I emptied her commode, I helped her bathe, and I organized appointments and such. This caretaking role caused me to rethink what I wanted to do after high school. I always had wanted to go to college out of state and get a good job and start my life. I ended up going to a local technical college and I got an associate's degree. I'm not complaining about my education or my job. I have succeeded in that aspect of my life, and I do have a good job and I do make a nice living. It's just not what I had originally planned. I felt that if I left, no one would take care of her like I was taking care of her. She wouldn't have had anyone around to take care of her. She needed me. It took quite a few years, but she recovered to a point where I didn't need to give her that higher level of care, so I was able to somewhat have a life of my own. I found it difficult to talk to her about boyfriends because no one was ever good enough or they always had problems, so I didn't talk to her about them. When I found the man I wanted to spend more of my time with, I actually asked her if it would be okay if I moved out of the house. I was 21 at the time and asking permission to move. I did move out, however, and I was at her house practically every day and a lot of the weekends still doing her yard work or her housework or her shopping, whatever she wanted me to do. Unfortunately, I had the misfortune of marrying a cheating covert narcissist. Oof, we have to talk about this more on the show too, Monica, because I got to tell you, you're not the only one here with that story either. Any case, I'm diverting again. I will get back to what you have to tell us. It took me quite some time to realize that the type of person I was dealing with. I read everything on narcissism and being married to one, etc. I went through a bout of depression, but with help from a really wonderful support system, I managed to get out of the marriage. My mother didn't like him in the least. She always made comments about what a loser he was, and when I would defend him, I got the silent treatment. I hated the silent treatment. That was her weapon. Whenever I got the silent treatment, I really would cater to her. When I left my ex, the first words she said to me were, "Good, now you're away from him. You can take care of me now." And honestly, at the time, I didn't even think anything of it. I figured she was aging, needed the help, and I was happy to do it. I was at her house more than I was ever at my own. I would go to work in the morning, go to her house at lunch to do chores, and then after work, I was back at her house. I would cook all her meals, clean her house, do her yard work, grocery shopping. I was her driver, and I literally did everything for her. After being separated for a while, I felt like it was time to start dating again. I mentioned to her one time that I had to leave her place a little early and that I had a date, and she said, "You don't have time to date. You're taking care of me." So I always arranged dates around her schedule, and I never told her I was going out. This continued for around 4 years. At that time, I met the most wonderful man I am with now, and I'm sure you guessed it. She got upset that I was spending time with someone other than her. I started to get the cold shoulder and some silent treatment. Her stages of disrespect towards me followed the timeline of how much time I spent with Mike. As time went on and I started spending nights at his house or weekends at his house, I got more and more disrespected as a daughter. The last year to 2 years or so, she's treated me only as an employee. She never asks how I'm doing if I get sick and never asks how my dogs or my cats are. And she used to see the dogs every day as I would bring them with me to take care of her. I bought a new house and moved closer to my boyfriend about 10 months ago. She's never asked me once to see pictures of the house or asked me what it's like. I've been relegated to employee status. I started calling myself Cinderella. I hate having to go to her house, and I hate helping her do anything. I get anxious, and I just hate spending time with her or any effort whatsoever dealing with her. I really put 2 and 2 together when I was moving that she is a covert narcissist and treats me really badly. Of course, I hit the internet for all kinds of information on that aspect of narcissism, and I learned quite a bit. And I've recently started to put boundaries in place so that I can have peace in my life with the man that I love. Here's a tidbit that you need to know as well. I not only have a narcissistic mother, I also had an overt narcissistic father. I always viewed him as the problem growing up. I always blamed him for my low self-esteem and how I reacted to things. I never looked at the person who really shaped me, and that was my mom. I'm realizing that I act the way that I do because she made me that way. I am the people-pleasing caretaker that hates confrontations and arguments. I will avoid confrontations at all costs. which makes it very difficult to set the needed boundaries. I also have 4 older brothers. I save them to mention here because we all have our roles to play. My mother has cast us in a very typical narcissistic pattern. My oldest brother is an overt narcissist and left home at 18 and has made it very clear to all of us that his friends are more important than family. I don't see him very much, and he doesn't come around very much. He only comes around when it makes him look good. My next oldest brother is the scapegoat. He was to blame for anything and everything that went wrong at home. He had ADHD, so he was quote unquote dumb, and he was the one that caused all of the trouble at school and couldn't sit still and never did anything right. The next 2 brothers are the golden children, and oh yes, are they perfect and can do no wrong. They are the smartest and the most athletic, the ones she brags to anyone who will listen to her about. They are the ones that when they come to visit, I have to make sure the house is freshly cleaned. All of their favorite foods are purchased and they're for their consumption because they don't need to be spending their own money for the specialty foods that they like. And I also need to make myself available to cook said meals for everyone. And then there's me, the lost child, the caregiver child, the only girl who's expected to do everything. I reached out to the youngest of the golden children and told them that I will no longer tolerate being disrespected by our mom and that I needed to set some boundaries. I asked him for his help in finding appropriate caregivers to help her with certain things during the week. I sent him a list of what I'm willing to continue to do for her and informed him that I will only make that trip once a week. I asked for his help in dealing with her because it has gotten to the point where she won't listen to me anymore. He expected me to have some sort of long discussion with her and get everything done on my own, and I said that I wouldn't. I said that any agency or nurse I would choose to help her would be wrong and that I would end up being blamed for everything. I set my boundary that I will continue doing what I have been doing until September 1st. That gave him 10 weeks to get things in place for her. I also told him that he needed to contact the others for help and that I was done. The only brother who was around to help me was the second oldest, the scapegoat, and he stopped helping years ago when he realized himself what our mom was. That was the most difficult conversation I've ever had in my entire life. I wasn't looking forward to that, and I was stressed beyond belief to have it. But you know what? Now I feel so much better. There is an end in sight for me being treated this way. I've set my boundaries and they know I mean it, and I've told them if they can't abide by my boundaries, then I need to remove myself completely from any caretaking that needs to be done. I'm so looking forward to having that peace in my life and being able to do what I want and spend time with the people I want to be with. I have an amazing man in my life, and he has 2 wonderful kids. I'm repairing the relationship with my former stepson. It's another long story, but he's finding out that his dad is the narcissist and I wasn't necessarily the bad guy in that relationship. I have a wonderful home with the dogs and cats that I love to absolute pieces. I'm looking forward to a peaceful life without the anxiety and dysfunction. I will still help her out. After all, she's my mother and I do love her. I just have limits now. Your podcast reinforced for me that I'm not crazy. I have every right to feel how I feel, and I have every right to set those boundaries and protect my own sanity. I have the right to be me and live my own life. I'm 45 years old, and it's about time I take care of myself for a change. Please keep doing what you're doing, and I will listen when you put out new shows. I get them on Wednesdays on my Apple podcast, and by the weekend, I'm caught up. I would love it if you would talk about the sibling dynamics sometime. It's interesting to me how the narcissist will put everyone into certain roles like my mom did, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Sorry that this email got longer than I had anticipated, but I wanted to send it to you and let you know that I'm listening and appreciate your insights on this topic. It's important to me. It makes me feel like I'm not alone and that what I am doing is appropriate. I still second-guess myself sometimes because it's really hard to break free from the mindset that I've had for so very long. I look forward to hearing your upcoming thoughts, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Oh, gosh, Monica, you have come so far with managing so very much. You've overcome so much, and you have so very much to be proud of. You, my friend, have saved yourself, and you have loved yourself when your own mother and your own family of origin couldn't. That's going to go so far in your healing. You also have allowed yourself to be loved in a way that you truly deserve now. and in the way that feels the most true and the most right for you. It makes sense to me that you wanted to start the conversation about the sibling relationships. If you could work things out with them, it would be easier to work out the caregiving things about your mom. But if you're going to allow me here for a second, I actually want to start with the caregiving piece. You're assuming the responsibility for caregiving or for organizing her caregiving. And this happens to so many of the women that I'm working with. It starts, I think, with this societal expectations that kids care for aging parents, and then narcissistic mothers latch onto that and they grab onto it like white on rice, and then they program their kids to believe that this is a true expectation. It is not at all true. It is not a requirement of being born into this world that we become physically responsible for the people who brought us into the world. That is a story that's been programmed into us. You owe your mother nothing. Anything you do for her is because you choose to do it for her, not because it's expected, not because you owe her, and not because people will talk about you if you don't. Any aid you offer your mom has to come from a knowing of yourself, a knowing that tells you that not helping your mother doesn't work for you, that you couldn't move through the world as yourself and still feel whole if you didn't help her. You don't help your mom for her, you help her for you because it's your choice. So, in my boundaries episodes, we talked about this. If you go back to episodes 5 and 6, I talked to you way more in depth. And then also, too, in our third episode, I worked with all of you to have a better relationship with yourselves by spending more time knowing yourself a little bit more, knowing what you want, how you want to move through the world. And if any of you listening haven't listened to our first 8 episodes in order, please do take the time to do so. There's attachments included in the show notes of the episodes with the journaling prompts and exercises to consider. In your email here, Monica, I see that you really have taken this to heart and you do know yourself and you do know your boundaries. I just want to make sure that you're setting these boundaries from the driver's seat of your life, from who you want to be and how you want to move through the world, not the expectation that you have to do something. We don't want you shooting on yourself here. And I think many of you daughters are programmed to believe that what a good daughter is and what a good daughter does, and you forget that caregiving is earned. Parents earn caregiving by caring for you, by loving you, by looking out for you. When you have to do all of that on your own, when you have to raise yourselves and save yourselves, they have not earned the right to your caregiving. They have not made the deposits into your relationships, into their relationships with you to earn that. Not getting your love, not getting your care, it is a natural consequence of not loving you or not caring for you in the way that you needed them to. And some of you are surely caregiving anyway, but I want all of you to get back in the driver's seat of that choice, because caregiving for someone who has abused you can really be re-traumatizing if you're not careful. Think about it for a second. You are going back to take better care of the person who took lousy care of you. Some of you, in your hearts and in how you move through the world, it would be inconsistent with yourselves if you were just to walk away. And you have to know that that is your choice. You are doing it because not doing it doesn't work for you. Then, as you start to consider any future caregiving you might do, you have to remember that any contact you have with your mom is going to come with a side of her narcissism. Narcissists do what narcissists do. They act narcissistically. So we aren't going to hope that they're calm. We're not going to hope and expect for their gratitude. You are going to get clear with yourself What kind of caregiver do I want to be? Where does she end and where do I begin? What am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? What will my response be if she criticizes me? If she denies or rejects the help that I'm offering, how many times am I actually willing to try again? If or when she fires the people that I hire to help her, will I try again? You want to get yourself in the driver's seat for all of it. Anything you do, anything you don't do, anything you say, anything you don't say comes from what's true for you, from who you want to be, and for how you want to move through the world. And only you, Monica, and only you, everyone else listening, only you guys get to define what that is and what that looks like for all of you. After all, what we can see here from your share, Monica, is that time and time again, your mom uses her health as a weapon. She's used it to manipulate you, and she's used it to keep you close. She's used it to get you to do her bidding, and she's used her health to get you to feel sorry for her, to get a reaction out of you. Her health has essentially become the same thing as any other narcissistic weapon in her arsenal. We wouldn't be encouraging you to indulge when she's triangulating or gaslighting. And I see her health here being used in the exact same way to manipulate you and to control you. She's using her health because it works, it gets attention. It makes people feel obliged. It makes her look hopeless. It makes her look innocent. And just as you have learned to protect yourself from her lies and her pressure, protecting herself from this undue pressure to care for her is also going to be critical to your recovery. Any of you daughters who are feeling trapped in caring for your narcissistic mothers, how does your caregiving story change if we talk about her health as a narcissistic weapon she is using? Does it make your boundaries that you need to set any more clear? Does it make it maybe even easier for you to set those boundaries? Does it change your mind about anything or shift any of the stories you've been telling yourselves? I want you guys to give this some thought and see what it helps you learn about yourselves, what your needs are, and what your caregiving boundaries might be. Now I want to remind you too of something I've said in earlier episodes of the show. Any child raised by a narcissist is an abused child, even the golden children. When you grow up in an environment where you are expected to be a certain way and you see what happens to others when you don't fall in line, you don't get to become your true self. You don't get to think your own thoughts freely. You don't get to feel your own feelings. Everything comes with a side of knowing what happens if you displease your mother, and that creates its own trauma, its own hypervigilance, and its own coping responses. So if your brothers are opening up to you about their experiences, if they're showing you what it feels like to be them and what their struggles have been moving through the world, by all means, connect with them on this and talk about it. But be really careful, because opening up trauma wounds for people who may have not acknowledged with themselves that they've been traumatized is really risky. You can't help them if you don't know, and you can't make assumptions or assume. Monica, you have spent a lot of time reflecting on your boundaries. You and other daughters who have come from these big families, you all share in this same struggle. You not only have to determine your boundaries with your mother, you have to think through what your boundaries are with the entire family system. You heard me talk a couple of weeks ago to our Golden Girls. Oh gosh, I love that I used the Golden Girls. But you heard me talk to them about setting boundaries and how they are going to manage their enabling fathers. The narcissistic mother touches everyone and everything, but often it affects all of you really differently based on how they've been affected or not been affected or how much work they've done. This is going to impact all of you in all kinds of different ways. But the goal of the show isn't just to protect you from your abusive mother. It's to protect you from abuse, period. And this aging parent thing gets weaponized by so many people in the family system for so many different reasons. The best thing you can do here is be true to you. You will have different boundaries with each person based on how they treat you, and that's okay. You're going to be closer to the people who respect your boundaries. That's the natural consequence of respecting people's boundaries. You get to be closer to them. Some are going to have created so much damage in the past that no matter what they do in the present, you're going to feel protective of the life you've built, and you may not want to let them in. Either way, all of it's okay, and all of it is healthy. All of it is normal. What's very likely is that you, Monica, have just never given yourself permission to really be true to yourself. The work of healing is to know that you get to protect your relationship with yourself and to protect the life that you're building. Cheers to you for never again stocking your mother's fridge with someone else's favorites. Cheers to you for never again cooking a freaking meal for the brothers who can gosh darn cook for themselves. And cheers to you for building a life by your own design, for rebuilding relationships with the people who are showing up for you and showing up for healing. Cheers to you, Monica, for rebuilding your life back up and redefining your chosen family. Thank you. Gosh, thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing all the parts, and for allowing all of us to see you. I know that for so many of the women listening, they saw their own story in your words. Next week, hold on to your hats, folks. I'm talking to Carrie and helping her as she is financially tangled with her mom, and her mom has her daughter entangled in all of that too. We're navigating that together next week. Monica, you have a community of women around the world who are in this with you, and I am too. Bye for now. I'm so grateful that you're here. You're right where you're supposed to be. At its heart, I'm hoping to use this show to build a community of women working together to heal from childhoods marked by maternal narcissism and emotional neglect. My goal for Mother Mayhem is that this show becomes an advice and mentoring-driven show where you share your questions, struggles, and stories, and I offer you direction for healing and recovery. That can't happen without your contributions. I invite you to send a recorded voice memo or write in an email with your questions and things you're struggling with. You can always find me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. To connect further, I invite you to find me over at Instagram and occasionally on TikTok at DaughtersNPD. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, I'm going to ask that you share the show with her. You can help me get the word out with your reviews and social shares of the show, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing this show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks for your time today. I'm always in it with you. Bye for now.